Hi, good night of Shabbos. This is Rabbi Tzvi Mandel of Congregation called Bnei Yisrael, community of Jewish friends. And so, we're almost there, right? The great, special Yontif of Shavuos is coming upon us, the holiday that makes us a nation of kings and Kohanim priests, worshiping Hashem, which never before the Jewish people happened in this world. It was always the angels, and Hashem made us higher than the angels. This is how it's explained in Chassidishe Svarim. We became the Mamleches Kohanim B'Goy Kaddish, holy nation. This is already a higher level, but at least Mamleches Kohanim, every Jew knows that Hashem loves every single one of us and created the whole world for every one of us, particularly, and in general, the Jewish people. It's a tall order, big job, but also the special love and connection between he and us and him, both on a general level and every individual yidel, every individual yid. And this Shabbos is Shabbos Chazak. We're finishing the Chumash Vayikra with two pashas, Bahar and B'chukaisai. The HaChaim HaKadosh on the first three words of the pasha, B'chukaisai Telechu, if you will go in my statutes, the way they translated in my follow the Torah, has 42 interpretations. Many of them important principles of Yiddishkeit. But before that, Shabbos is the outside of the great Reb Shlomo Zavila. Shlomo Zavila, Reb Shlomo Zavila, they called him Reb Shlomo Zavila, came from Russia to Eretz Yisrael during the before the Second World War, and in Europe was the Rebbe of thousands of Chassidim in Russia. But when he came to Israel, didn't tell anyone who he was, and sat down in Torah Vayira, was it, or in Chayolam, maybe Chayolam, the big Yerushalayim yeshiva that was in existence then, still is, and was for hundreds of years. Before that, I think it never stopped since I don't know what time, how long ago. Took a Gemara and sat down and learned and partook in the yeshiva, became part of the yeshiva. Nobody looked at him. And there was... So we'll start with this story. This story I heard from Rabbi Bleich, the former chief rabbi of Russia, who heard from Rabbi Deutsch. I think he's the Rosh Hashiva of the Yeshiva Mekubalim in Yerushalayim, who told him that this story he personally knew either he was the one who it happened with or from the person that it happened with. So Reb Shlomo Zavila was sitting in the Beis Medrash day and night studying, and I don't know where he slept, how he was, it wasn't like a dormitory and all that. Everybody had places in their own homes, the small little homes, maybe 10 or 12 kids sleeping in one dining room, if you could call it a dining room, if there was two rooms in the place, maybe. And I don't know where other people slept. But there was this Yid over here that noticed that this person is not a simple person. So he became friendly with him. He brought him breakfast every day, I think it was. And he would speak to him and here and there. And the day that the great chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, Rav Kook Zechron Livracha, passed away, Reb Shlomo Zavila asked him, "Do you want to know what happened in the higher worlds?" He says, "Yes, Rebbe, please tell me." He says, what happened was they right away took him to the highest heichel, the highest level of learning in the other world, if you want to call it that. And he looked around and he saw Rav Sonnenfeld, who in this world argued a lot with him, and there was a lot of differences between them, though they were both very, very great holy people and big scholars, Torah, Talmid Chacham, and loved each other very much. But in the real world, in this world, there were political differences between them or between their people. And he said, I don't want to be here because on earth we were rivals, though he is a great man. So they immediately took him and put him in a heichel higher than that. I heard this from a person who heard it from the person who heard this from Reb Shlomo Kazavilla. Reb Shlomo Kazavilla was an unbelievable Rebbe. Anything that anyone asked him for a shaila, any question that person had, whether it was mundane, whether it was spiritual, whether it was emotional, he said, I have to first go to the mikveh, and he would go to the mikveh, and he came back with an answer, not a maybe or you could. This is exactly the answer. As if you're going to the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash, the high priest in the temple, and he comes back with an answer. This is what Hashem wants, because on the Urim V'Tumim, this what was the answer. He was very clear in his answers, and people had open miracles from him. And his main thing that he's known for in Yerushalayim was he took care of the cats. Everybody knows in Yerushalayim there were cats, little skinny cats running around looking for a little food. He took care of the cats. And the mice. And the rats. And you have to understand, back in the 20s and the 30s, for whatever reason, things weren't so built up. And even in general in the world, I didn't say the hygiene wasn't up to par. Maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was. But that's how it was. And I heard from a Yid, Herzog, I think his name is, who heard from a Yid by the name of Dannenberg, who is definitely related to my wife, but she doesn't know him. Yid that lived in Bar Park all the years, a Chassidishe Yid, who told my friend Herzog this exact story. He was in Yerushalayim then, and he was in the middle of speaking to the great Reb Shlomo Kazavilla, who was a little short, skinny, this Heilig Tzaddik. And in the middle of his speaking, he noticed that there was a rat that ran this way and tried to grab away food from the other rat. And he called out to him and said, Shimon, go back to where you came from. You know that you came to this world because you took from others things that don't belong to you. And it right away ran back. He was like, boggled. But that's who Reb Shlomo Kazavilla was. He lived in two worlds. Really, you could say a tzaddik that was living in two worlds. There's unbelievable stories about his chesed, and where he always had a house full of guests day and night. And of course, it goes without saying that he knew the whole Torah backwards and forwards, the revealed and the secret Torah, and was immersed in the yichudim and learning day and night, like the Heilig Tzaddikim. He said a beautiful word that I heard today from Rabbi Shimon Spitzer. The Gemara says that, a very encouraging word, in fact. The Gemara says that when people come to the next world, human beings come to the next world after 120, when they come to the world that comes to them, like Chazal say, Olam Haba, the world that comes to you, the world that you built for yourself. So poor people won't have the excuse that they didn't do whatever they had to do, whether it's learning or whatever, because they were poor. Because Hashem will say, look at Hill Mechayvus Hanim. Hill barely made anything from his Panasa, and then he would go study in the Beis Medrash, and he just gave the watchman by the shul the nickel or whatever he took to be able to sit and learn. Someone says that he couldn't learn because he had so many businesses all over the place that he couldn't just sit down and study. So there was another Tana, or Rebbe Elazar ben Chamisna, I think it was, who was very rich and had businesses all over, whole cities and businesses that he owned, and he made it his business to sit and study. Someone will say that he couldn't pass a test like Yosef HaTzadik. Hashem will say, look at Yosef HaTzadik. He was in the most inhumane, impure place in the world, Egypt. Arab neighbors. Those days, going back thousands of years ago, and passed the test. And he knew that he's connected to Hashem. So the Reb Shlomo Kasavila said in the name of his Zayda, the Heilige Michal Zlotcheva, the Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, what in the world are Chazal telling us? It's very not encouraging. So everybody is responsible because these great tzaddikim passed that test, whether it was poverty or being rich. That's not so encouraging. What are Chazal telling us? It's this unbelievable, beautiful thing. Just the opposite. No one understands a poor person except another poor person. So when Hashem says to the poor person, why didn't you study? Why didn't you go to shul and learn? Why didn't you whatever? This tzaddik will pop up, tzaddik will say, me? I was on the level, I was able to. What do you want from this poor guy? When the rich man will come and say, I didn't have a second to my life. And Bezdin Shalmaila will say, what about Rebbe Elazar ben Chamisna? Chamisna will come and he'll say, look, he didn't have such a high neshama like me, so the money was a big test for him. And the same thing will happen with Yosef HaTzadik. Very beautiful pshat. It's not the simple interpretation. One more story, because the Heilige Rebbe Meir Primshlana's Yazar is coming. I think it's this coming Tuesday or Wednesday. Anyway, so Rebbe Meir Primshlana is very, very great. Everybody knows he used to refer to himself as Meirel. And Rabbi Spitzer said that he knew Rabbi Padua, I think it was from England, who just passed away about 3 years ago. I think it was one of the big rabbanim there. And he heard this from Rabbi Padua, who actually knew this couple. Well, not really knew, but what happened was he was walking the street with his brother back in Vienna, in Wien, between the wars, one of the places where Yidden ran away from the Nazis, until they came and took over there. And his brother says to him, you see that couple in front of us, that elderly couple? And he says, yes. He says, they have a bracha from a Meir Primshlana. He says, what? Meir Primshlana passed away in Tafresh Yud. It's over 100 years ago than it was. Or maybe about 100 years ago. And as he says that, the man turns around and says, are you talking about me? And they said, yes. Could you please tell us about your bracha? He said, sure, I'll tell you. I was a young man, he says, and he was a shamus or a gaba or a helper in the house of the great Reb Shlomo Kluger. Shlomo Kluger was one of the greatest non-Hasidic scholars of the day. He wrote Elef L'Chashleim. I think he wrote 1,000 svarim, many on halacha, and many that till today we paskin like him, and very, very great, great, great person. He was in fact a close friend of Meir Primshlana. But what happened was, he says, I was a young man and I was a shamus or a gabe in the house of Reb Shlomo Kluger, and when he first brought me into his home and taught me what he wants for me to do to help him in his home, one of my jobs was to prepare the fish l'kavod Shabbos Kodesh Friday afternoon. And he showed me how to prepare the fish, and he said, don't cut this area because it's bitter and it gives a very bad taste to the whole fish. And he sat there and he was watching how I cut the fish, and he thought that I did exactly the opposite of what he says. And he put his finger in. He didn't say anything. Great tzaddik, he didn't want to embarrass me, but he thought that I did the wrong thing. And then he tasted it and he said, oh no, he said, you did it right. But since I suspected you doing wrong, the Gemara says, like we find by Moshe Rabbeinu, someone who, God forbid, suspects someone that's innocent that they did something wrong. So Moshe Rabbeinu was punished with leprosy right then on the spot. So I don't want to get punished, so I'm giving you a bracha, you should live to 100. That's my story. Well, Reb Shlomo Kluger passed away and I got married and had a family. and my wife and I were getting older, and I went once to Reb Meir Primeshlana. Maybe he meant more than once, but one time he went to Reb Meir Primeshlana. He was a Chassidishe with a kvittel, and the Heilig Reb Meir Primeshlana looks at the kvittel and says, "Wait a minute, you have a bracha, you have a blessing from the great Reb Shlomo Kluger that you live to 100. What'd you come to me for?" So he says, "I want the Rebbe to add to the bracha." The Rebbe Primeshlana thinks, he says, "I'm going to add. Your wife is included in that blessing, and both of you will live to 100 in good health and good hearing." So now you know why I turned around when you called my name, right? And they asked him how old he was. He said he was 98. Her also, they asked how old she was, and I don't recall what he said. We should, us and our spouses and all our children and descendants, should live to Arichas Yom Rishon Gesund, good hearing, good seeing, and main thing, good spiritually, good seeing and good hearing. So we'll learn a little bit of HaChaim HaKadosh, as we said, only a few of them. If you will go in my ways. So, says the HaChaim, the Teres Kahanim says this is from Chazal, it's like a Gemara based on the Chumash. I would think that this refers to doing mitzvahs, but when it says you should keep my mitzvahs, obviously this means something else. So what does it mean? You should toil in studying the Holy Torah. So why does the Torah call toiling in Torah chayk? Chayk we know means a law that one must follow without knowing the reason why, just because Hashem said so, and you fear and love Hashem, and Hashem loves you. Says the HaChaim HaKadosh something very beautiful. Because it's a special mitzvah of studying Torah to learn it 3 times, even if you know it already, and you know it well. Because Hashem wants you to busy yourself with studying Torah, not for the reason of knowing it. This part of the studying the Torah is without understanding why, just because Hashem said so. And we find that Chazal say, in Koheles, Medrash and Koheles, that the reason why a person that the reason why Hashem made that a person should study and forget his learning is so that he should always learn with a cheshik and a geschmack and a joy and a will to know and desire to know what Hashem's will is. Very beautiful. So that's why it's called a chayk. And the reason why it says chayk chakakti, which is plural, because there are 2 Torahs, the written Torah and the oral Torah. And the reason why it says the Messiris of the word, the way it's written, is Lashon Yachid is only singular, because there's no Vav and there's between the Kuf and the Taf, and that singular is because the Torah, the oral Torah, is included in the written Torah. Very beautiful. Another remez, another thing that HaChaim HaKadosh says is that Mechukaisai in my statutes, plural, comes to teach us that a person is supposed to study Torah by day and by night. Doesn't mean all day and all night, that everybody could do that, but everybody should have a specific time that he learns or she learns during the day and also by night. 2 times of learning. And according to that interpretation, the reason why it's written in a singular form is because both times are from one day. This day is split into day and into night, and one should have an orderly time to learn, an hour, whatever it is, half hour day, half hour by night. Okay. Another thing he brings down is that just like it's a mitzvah to study yourself, you must study with others. And The great Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say that if a person knows nothing, I just know the Aleph Beis, so your mitzvah is to teach another Jew Aleph Beis. Whatever you learn, learning and teaching is the same. I have to say, my dear special father, Avi Mari Reb Pinchas ben Reb Zevkas, used to say in the name of his Rebbe, Reb Moshe Liba, special person. He came to the States from Europe probably in the early 20s or so, and he started Liba's chocolates, not the one from Israel, the one that from here. And he used to learn with them in those days. Those days he learned the Daf Yomi, which was just created just about then. It was unheard of here in the United States, but they had a class that would learn Daf Yomi. My Zayda, Rabbi Yeshua Modche, Rabbi Gavil, my Zayda Sperling learned with him. And he would say, in Yiddish, the word learning and the word teaching is both the same. So in Yiddish, say, Ich lerne Torah, I'm learning Torah. It could also mean I'm teaching Torah. It could also mean I am teaching the Torah. I'm interpreting the Torah. I'm telling the Torah what it means. So he would say, Die lernst Torah, vus lernt dich the Torah. You are learning Torah, but what is the Torah teaching you? It's a big question we have to ask ourselves, and not fall to the side of those people that think that they own the Torah and could translate it however they want, because as we learned in Pirkei Avos last week, it's not so pretty. We have a lot of that today. People teaching Torah the wrong way from the other side. Okay. One more to go. You shall go, or you shall walk in the ways of the Torah. Says the HaChaim HaKadosh. It says in Mishlei, King Solomon Shlomo says, in all your ways you shall know Hashem. You should be connected to Hashem. Remember, we always say, Das means to be connected to. Says the Rambam in the 3rd chapter of Ilchis Yisayda HaTorah, or in Hilchos Deis, person should take to heart to have a healthy body and a strong body in order to be able to know Hashem, because it's impossible to understand and to study deeply and be steeped in Torah without a healthy body. And this way, whoever goes in this way, whoever leads their life in this way, having a healthy body and a normal, sane body, whether it's emotionally and mentally or whether it's physically, is called the Oved Hashem, says the Holy Rambam. Wow. It's called one that worships Hashem the correct way. And we'll end with this. I once told you this story from the Heilige Taz. The Holy Taz is one of the biggest poskim. You open the Shulchan Aruch, and the Taz is right there. Magen Avraham and the Taz. Turei Zav, one of the greatest halacha deciders long before the Baal Shem Tov. And also I heard the story from Rabbi Shimon Spitzer in the name of the Sefer Beis Rebbe, not the Lubavitch one, but the one from the Chayzim Ulablim, where he writes about the great tzaddikim, the students of the Baal Shem Tov and their students. And this is a mind-boggling story. The great Abder Rav, Rabbi Avraham Yeshua Heschel, the Ohev Yisrael, the lover of Yidden, right, was a very big Paisik, also very big rabbi in his community, in a number of communities, and was accepted universally. And he used to study everything in the Torah 4 ways, Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Dursai, the 4 ways that one can study Torah. And especially Taz, he used to learn all 4 ways, not only the simple interpretation, but also according to Kabbalah and according to Remez. And he once came across a Taz, a Turei Zav, and he couldn't figure out how to go according to Kabbalah, according to Said, according to Arizal, according to Baal Shem Tov. So he toiled and toiled, like we just learned, and couldn't figure it out. So he made a leis neshama. He went up to heaven, and he met the Taz, and he said, Rebbe, what happened to you over here? Why didn't you do this according to Kabbalah? And the Torah Zav answered him, if you would have known what was going on those days in the Dark Age for me and my family, Yidden were being killed out like anything, so we ran to the cold wilderness for 3 days. We didn't eat anything, me, my wife, and my children. I was immersed in learning and trying to find something to eat for us, and so I couldn't figure this one out according to Kabbalah. So the Yisrael said, wow, very special. And he said, while I have you here anyway, upstairs, I want to ask you, during your time, were there maybe some great higher people, holier people, that already understood the Derech HaBaal Shem Tov, the way of the Baal Shem Tov, before it was even created, before the Baal Shem Tov came to our world? So he said, yes. And I was one of those people. And I'll prove it to you. If you look in Even Ezra Siman Chav Hey, it says there, Shav lachem mashkimei kum. He doesn't agree with people that get up early in the morning to study Torah, and then comes noontime, they fall asleep on top of the Gemara or going to the Sefer that they're learning. Better sleep an extra couple minutes or an extra hour so you'll have strength to be up all day. So that's Gashmiz, Almanas Ruchniz, that's a yesod from the Baal Shem Tov. That means, as we just learned in HaChaim, that means being healthy in a good, healthy way, emotionally, physically, take care of your body, and that's called the Oved Hashem. That's called a real worshiper of Hashem. And we know that from the Baal Shem Tov, says the Taz to the Ohev Yisrael. Schusam Yagan Aleinu L'Kal Yisrael. Amen. The Ohev Yisrael learned Taz, even the Simonim, the chapters, which chapter, the numbers of the chapters, also according to Kabbalah, why this one was here and why that one was there. And also it's brought down from maybe the Ohev Yisrael also, that he didn't allow to even correct things in the Taz that might have been wrong, because according to the Kabbalah it's correct. Great people. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Rabbanon. Great are we. Have a great, joyous Shabbos, and see you, Mitzvah Hashem.